The term medieval refers to the Middle Ages, a historical period in Europe that lasted roughly from the 5th century to the late 15th century, approximately 476 AD to 1500 AD. It is the period between the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the beginning of the Renaissance around the 14th century. This era lasted roughly 1,000 years and is often divided into 3 phases: the early, high, and late Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages. This was a time of major change in Europe following the collapse of the Roman Empire. Fall of Rome, 476 AD. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus. Without Roman control, Europe became fragmented into small kingdoms ruled by tribal leaders. Cities declined, roads fell into disrepair, and trade networks collapsed. Rise of feudalism. With no strong central government, feudalism emerged. Kings granted land to nobles in exchange for loyalty and soldiers. Nobles gave land to knights, who promised military service. Peasants, or serfs, worked the land and supported the system. This structure created a rigid social hierarchy based on land and loyalty. Spread of Christianity. The Catholic Church became the most powerful and unifying institution. Monasteries preserved knowledge and served as centers of learning and aid. Missionaries like St. Patrick to Ireland and St. Boniface to Germany spread Christianity across Europe. The Pope gained significant influence over kings and politics. Viking invasions, 8th to 11th centuries. From Scandinavia, modern Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Vikings raided and settled across Europe. Famous for their longships, they targeted England, Ireland, France, and Russia. While feared for their brutality, Vikings also became traders and settlers, founding cities like Dublin and influencing local cultures. The invasions contributed to the rise of castles and local militias. The High Middle Ages was a period of significant growth and transformation in European history. It marked a time of political consolidation, religious expansion, cultural achievement, and economic prosperity. Strong monarchies. During the High Middle Ages, European monarchs began consolidating power, reducing the influence of feudal lords and the nobility. In France, the Capetian kings expanded their control from a small territory around Paris to broader regions, laying the groundwork for a centralized monarchy. In England, after the Norman Conquest, 1066, by William the Conqueror, the monarchy created a powerful administrative system, including the Domesday Book, a record of land ownership and taxation. Spain saw the Christian Reconquista gain ground against Muslim rule, strengthening Christian kingdoms like Castile and Aragon. In the Holy Roman Empire, modern Germany, emperors held vast influence, but often struggled with rebellious nobles and conflicts with the Pope. These monarchies created more organized bureaucracies, national armies, and legal systems, laying the foundation for modern nation-states. The Crusades, 1096 to 1291. The Crusades were religious wars initiated by the Catholic Church to reclaim the Holy Land, Jerusalem, from Muslim control. Key Crusades. First Crusade, 1096 to 1099, resulted in the Christian capture of Jerusalem and establishment of Crusader states. Second Crusade, 1147 to 1149, failed attempt to reinforce Christian holdings in the Holy Land. Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, led by Richard the Lionheart of England against Saladin, ended in a truce allowing Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem. Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, diverted to Constantinople, sacked the city, and never reached the Holy Land. Increased trade between Europe and the East, spices, silk, ideas, strengthened the papacy, though later Crusades damaged its reputation. Introduced Islamic science, mathematics, and medicine to Europe, left a legacy of religious conflict between Christianity and Islam. Gothic cathedrals and cultural flourishing. This era saw the rise of Gothic architecture, symbolizing the growing power of the Catholic Church and the wealth of European cities. Pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses to support tall walls. Stained glass windows depicting biblical stories. Enormous height and verticality meant to reach toward heaven. Examples: Notre Dame de Paris, Chartres Cathedral, Cologne Cathedral. Scholasticism, theological and philosophical thought in universities. Rise of medieval universities. Bologna, Paris, Oxford. Latin literature and religious texts flourished. Early vernacular literature emerged. Dante in Italy, troubadours in France. Agricultural and economic growth. Between 1000 and 1300, Europe experienced a population boom due to improvements in farming and climate. Three-field system, rotating crops to keep soil fertile. Heavy plow and horse collar, improved plowing and efficiency. Clearing forests and draining swamps expanded usable land. Surplus food supported urban growth and marketplaces. Trade revived, merchant guilds formed, trade routes expanded, e.g., Hanseatic League. Rise of a money economy, reducing reliance on barter. Growth of towns and cities like Venice, Bruges, and Florence. Emergence of the middle class, burghers or bourgeoisie. The late Middle Ages was a time of both crisis and change. While Europe was shaken by war, famine, and plague, this period also saw the beginnings of modern society, with major social, economic, and cultural transformations. The Black Death, 1347 to 1351. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Likely began in Central Asia, spread along Silk Road trade routes, and entered Europe via Italian ports, especially Genoa and Venice. Carried by fleas on rats, the disease spread rapidly across Europe. Killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people, 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population. Entire villages vanished. Cities were depopulated. Society descended into fear, chaos, and religious hysteria. Labor shortages gave surviving peasants greater bargaining power. Wages rose and serfdom weakened as people demanded freedom or fled to towns. Deep psychological and religious impact. People questioned the church and God's will. Rise in anti-Semitism, with Jewish communities blamed and persecuted. The 100 Years' War, 1337 to 1453. A prolonged conflict between the kingdoms of England and France, mostly over claims to the French throne and territorial disputes. Early English victories, e.g., Battle of Crécy 1346, Agincourt 1415. Use of the longbow gave England a temporary advantage. French resurgence in the 15th century, partly inspired by Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl who claimed divine guidance. France won, and England lost nearly all its territories in France, strengthened French national identity and centralized monarchy, weakened English monarchy, led to internal strife. War of the Roses. Decline of feudalism. Feudalism, which had structured society for centuries, began to crumble during the late Middle Ages. Plague wiped out laborers, increasing the value of workers. Peasant revolts, e.g., English Peasants' Revolt of 1381, challenged the old order. Kings grew more powerful, building professional armies and weakening local lords. Shift from land-based wealth to money economy and Bourbon trades. Rise of individual rights and early democratic ideas in some regions. Feudal obligations were increasingly replaced by paid labor or tenancy. Lords sold off lands or joined the rising merchant class. Rise of towns and universities. Trade routes revived. Italian cities, Venice, Genoa, Florence, became wealthy through commerce and banking. Guilds regulated crafts and trades in towns. Towns gained charters from kings, granting rights and autonomy. The intellectual revival of the 12th and 13th centuries continued to grow. Major universities established: Oxford, Cambridge, Paris, Bologna. Studied theology, law, medicine, and philosophy, based on classical texts and church doctrine. Rise of scholasticism, the effort to reconcile faith with reason. For example, Thomas Aquinas. Growing interest in classical learning and human potential. Latin remained the language of scholarship, but vernacular writing grew. For example, Dante, Chaucer. Growing curiosity and skepticism laid the groundwork for the Renaissance and Reformation.